Director Anna Brzozowska-Krajka, who is present here today. So I hope the conference will be fruitful. We will have lively discussions. We'll gain insight and share experience. There will be contribution in both in our efforts to preserve intangible cultural heritage. I hope that discussions will be fruitful, and we say like God will here in our museum. Thank you. Thank you, Director. And the next one is the International Organization of Folk Arts Professor Anna Brzozowska.
Yes. Welcome everybody. Dear participants of IOV 15th European International Scientific Conference of Folk Culture, it is titled Intangible Cultural Heritage in European Social Space, Artistry and Cultural Practices, and is organized by the IOV Science and Research Commission for Europe, IOV Latvian Section, Latvia National Center for Culture, and the Ethnographic Open Air Museum in Latvia. Let me welcome heartily everybody present, especially the Latvian hosts and authorities, and those colleagues who came from a few countries of Europe to present their papers and take part in the conference discussions. Let me congratulate Dr. Aija Jansone and her colleagues for bringing this conference into effect, and let me thank them for their invaluable work on its organization. I am glad that the 15th Conference of Folk Culture of the IOV Science and Research Commission for Europe starts now in Riga. And we know it was planned to take place in 2020, but had to be put off because of the epidemic. Let me, as the chair of IOV Science and Research Commission for Europe, make a brief presentation of the scientific and research activities and tasks of this commission. Their scope comprises primarily the cultural heritage of European countries, viewed in two perspectives. One, the cultural individuality of particular ethnoses within Europe, their cultural distinctive features, and two, their common features, cultural universals combining individual nations within the broader community of European nations. We emphasize the correspondence between traditional and contemporary aspects of anthropologically orientated studies in folklore. The research concerns both spiritual and social areas of folk culture of European nations, with their material culture as context. Investigations are made into both traditional verbal folklore, its various genres, along with their inherent ethnosophy, and multi-coded folk messages, verbal, musical, dancing. The latter category comprises primarily the folk drama of the liturgical calendar ritual year and of the family calendar principal rites of passage. Comparative studies of the folkloric ritual calendar include, for example, similarities and differences of its elements across the folklore of various nations, or patterns of the transformation in contemporary culture. To illuminate changes in contemporary culture, it is also indispensable to take into account forms of folklore and folklorism functioning within contemporary mass culture, cultural unification. The other principal activities of IOV Science and Research Commission for Europe result from the general program of IOV UNESCO. They comprise building bridges among peoples and nations through undertaking common research, articulation and reception of their cultures, preservation of intangible heritage and archaic phenomena in various folk cultures, accumulation, systematization and spreading of the cultural heritage of European nations, working out a technology of the transfer of folk records on digital repositories of information. Comparative analysis of folklore phenomena are presented at international congresses, conferences, seminars, symposia, both European and worldwide. Common publication projects are also pursued. The IOV Science and Research Commission for Europe also stimulates research into the folk cultures of European nations and forwards scientific expertise and advice on organization of conferences, folk art exhibitions, and other cultural events. The IOV Science and Research Commission for Europe also engages in scientific cooperation with IOV scientific commissions for the other continents. For example, common research projects and their promotion at IOV World meetings, and international scientific organizations outside IOV structures. For example, the International Committee of Slavists, the Slavic and East European Folklore Association, USA. These types of activity are well illustrated by the IOV European scientific conferences, which have constituted a very significant realm of activities in the over 40 years long history of our organization. They were initiated by late Professor Mieczysław Marczuk, long-time chair of IOV World Science and Research Commission, and since 2000, the programming has been conducted by me. They were of great scientific and educational value. They have also strengthened integration of members of our organization. The participants of these conferences have come from countries of the East and of the West, of the North and of the South, to discuss and get to know the specific nature of various European cultures, as well as their conditions with non-European cultures, the features that are common to all, many or a few of them, cultural universals, and those which are particular to each culture, cultural specificity. This mode of cooperation is especially appropriate for our organization, IOV, which accomplishes the ideological principles of UNESCO to build mutual understanding and peaceful cooperation of nations, and thus to overcome all barriers and divisions among them, political, economic, racial, religious, and others. Let me list the 14 European scientific conferences of folk culture organized so far to remind you of them. The first entitled Future of European Cultural Heritage was held in Bursa, Turkey in June 1989. Second, entitled The Role of Folk Culture in Creating the Common European Home was held in Novgorod, Russia in June 1990. The third, entitled Threats to Folk Culture was held in Sharvar, Hungary in April 1992. The fourth conference, entitled Cultural Identity of Ethnic Minorities in Unifying Europe, Chances for Safeguarding at Threats, was held in France in August 1994. The fifth conference, entitled Condition of Folk Culture on the Threshold of the 13th Millennium, was held in Mountaindorf, Austria in April 1996. The sixth, entitled Threats to Folk Culture in the Process of European Integration, was held in Minsk, Belarus in September 1997. The seventh, entitled Folk Culture and Tourism, was held in Nicosia, Cyprus in September 1998. The eighth, entitled Chances for Folk Culture in the Process of European Integration, was held in Bucharest, Sibiu and Deva, Romania in August 1999. The ninth, entitled Folk Culture and Tourism and Their Contribution to the Culture of Peace, was held in Colmar, France in June 2000. The 10th, entitled Europe of Nation and Folk Cultures, was held in Vienna, Austria, Trenčanskie Teplice, Slovakia, and Sharvar, Hungary in May 2002. It was the first European conference across borders, as it took place in 3 neighboring countries in Central Europe. The 11th, entitled The Universal Values and National Distinctness of Traditional European Cultures, was held in Lublin and Kazimierz Dolny, Poland in June 2004. Selected papers from this conference were published in the bilingual monograph Polish-English, The Universal Values and National Distinctness of Traditional European Cultures, edited by Mieczysław Marczuk, Lublin, 2004. The 12th, entitled Folk Culture as a Source of National Symbols in Times of Globalization, was held in Lublin, Poland in June 2010. The 13th, entitled Roots and Roots of Traditional European Cultures in 21st Century, was held in Kiev and Sevastopol, Ukraine in June 2014. Selected papers from this conference were published in the bilingual monograph Ukrainian-English, Roots and Roots of Traditional European Cultures in the 21st Century, edited by Larisa Vaknina, Kyiv, 2017. The 14th conference, entitled Between Folk Culture and Global Culture in Contemporary Europe, was held in Andorf, Austria in November 2017. Selected papers from this conference were published in the scientific monograph Between Folk Culture and Global Culture in Contemporary Europe, edited by me and published by the Polish section of IOV Lublin and the International Organization of Folk Art, IOV, Communication and Publications Commission, the Kingdom of Bahrain, 2019. Let me present copies of book to the conference organizers. Aija has it already. Yeah. For you.
Yeah.
And
Good. Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. And the IOV 15th European International Scientific Conference of Folk Culture starts here and now. Let me thank once again all the colleagues who organized this conference, offered papers to share their knowledge and research with us, and all the participants. After the conference tomorrow at 4:40 p.m., we will hold an open meeting of IOV Science and Research Commission for Europe, to which everybody is invited. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this introduction. And I will give the floor to the visitors, to our guests who have prepared presents for you. Un draugi.
Ukraine, we would like to congratulate you in this beautiful city and this beautiful museum. And first of all, we would like to thank you very, very much for your attention, for your activity, inspiration, for organizing this great scientific and cultural event for all of us. I'm very glad to be again in this, the oldest museum in Europe. It is famous widely in Europe, also it is known your activity in our country, in Ukraine. It is a great event that you support all these tasks of UNESCO program to investigate, to promote, to support folk culture. And this 15th scientific conference is of great importance for all who are engaged in cultural and folkloric projects. It is very important to be in this institution because you do very, very much in all these tasks, in all fields of investigation of intangible and tangible cultural heritage. I would like to thank Director Mrs. Zandas Ķergalve. Sorry, I can't to memorize your name. To head of the ethnographic department, Professor Aija Jansone. Of course, to thank to Anita Brzozowska-Krajka, the head of scientific commission of IOV, to all our colleagues. You see, it is very important for us, especially now from Ukraine, because we feel your support from the first day of this terrible war, Russia against Ukraine, from the February 2022. And nevertheless, it is very, very long trip now from Kiev, more than 30 hours with a bus. When we know that we can be here in your circles for some days, we decided to join you, and we are very thankful for your hospitality and for all your for all everything you do also for Ukraine. Everybody know that in Latvia all buildings are also decorated with Ukrainian flags, symbolic of Ukraine state, and we are especially thankful for you in this aspect. Not to speak much, I would like to bring our best wishes also from our director, academician of the National Academy of Sciences, Professor Hanna Skripnik. And when she knew that we will take part in this conference, she wanted to present to your museum one of edition of Ukraine in folk pictures, architecture, and in costumes. You see, some ethnographic edition which we would like to present here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Щиро дякуємо, шановні колеги, і спасибі вам за підтримку України. Дякую.
Thank you. We have always great pleasure also seeing our Ukrainian colleagues here in Latvia. Un man ir tas gods pieteikt arī mūsu pirmo referātu, kuru sniegs vēsturzinātņu doktore, Latvijas Etnogrāfiskā Brīvdabas muzeja etnogrāfiskā departamenta vadītāja
Aija Jansone, the director of the ethnographical department, on the traditional and the contemporary in the museum.
Good day to the participants and guests of our conference. It is my task, in a concentrated manner, to inform you on the traditional and the modern in the contemporary in the Latvian folk culture and its perspectives. In Latvia today, traditional folk art is also contemporary. We are aiming to preserve the historical memory and national self-awareness. In the age of globalization, the issue of folk cultures perspectives is topical, and so we are trying to understand how to preserve the traditional element and how the contemporary is intermingling with it, how to support the traditional culture and also contemporary folk art. The presentation, the slides are in English, but I will speak in Latvian, as you see. In my research, I have based myself on statistics, on the Latvian Ethnographic open-air museums, traditional artisan annual fair, the number of participants, and the exhibitions, and then I have also done a questionnaire of masters, and thirdly, my own observations. In the second half of the 20th century, artists and craftsmen work individually as well as in an organized manner in the cities as well as in the countryside. Crafts are learned in families or autodidactically or in specialized schools or in interest groups. Masters work mostly individually. They apply their own taste in creating their crafts, the taste of the beautiful and the traditional. Masters are organized in interest groups according to the genre, and art studios which are chaired by experienced masters who share their skills and knowledge with their younger colleagues. So younger artisans are allowed to improvise within the realms of tradition. The creations are then exhibited in our annual fairs as well as in smaller fairs and markets throughout the country. There is an element of heritage, variety, development, all of that is to be traced in the contemporary folk art. We have 7 genres represented here. Textiles. What do we understand by textiles? This is ribbons and folk costumes. Then we have jewelry, twinings. We see produced of different materials, wood cuttings, a large variety, and we only see a small selection here. Then we have produce of blacksmith and our wonderful traditional pottery, leather produce. Following World War II, arts and craftsmen were organized in interest groups and studios. Now we have an increasing number of individual masters who work individually. And still the number of exhibits in our annual fair keeps growing. So on the first weekend every year in June, this annual fair is organized here in the Ethnographical Open Air Museum, and here we see a graph of the participants, this year's participants. For many masters, it's a question of honor to participate in the annual fair. The traditional annual fair was organized for the 51st time this year, and it has become the largest annual fair nationwide, which allows us to observe the development of traditional folk arts and to meet the traditional masters from our different cultural historical regions, and for the masters to exhibit their annual work results. We see high quality modern Latvian contemporary folk art exhibits on show here. Visitors can also taste honey, bread, and they can see the artisan items that have been produced and are on exhibit here. In the past few years, the number of those who would like to participate in the fair with their exhibits has grown. And so we have a traditional fair in June, and then a contemporary section, which is organized also in Riga in the Ethnographical Open-Air Museum. Here we see a graph of the participants of the contemporary crafts market, this year's market, analyzing the traditional and the contemporary exhibits. We see a certain change in the exhibits, which is shown in this graph. You can see the traditional fair, the dynamics of the traditional fair. The participants of that fair, and in the gray color, the contemporary fair. The contemporary fair shows new materials and new applications for the items on exhibit. We also see a revival of old crafts such as glass, china, and other artisan crafts. We see new inventions as well as items where traditional materials or compositions are used, but modern technologies are also used to produce them. Not all practicing artisans participate in our fairs, especially blacksmiths. Lots of them are working individual for their clients, producing different items, and sometimes they feel they don't have the time to participate in our annual fair. They're very busy. And it should also be mentioned that there are fairs and exhibitions across the country where participants from different age groups and social groups offer the results of their work to the visitors. So skills and taste play a large role here, as well as the desire to show beautiful, unique, traditional or contemporary folk items. We see that crafts are no longer inherited across generations, and therefore we need schools where these crafts can be learned by new artisans of a new generation. And as regards our future perspectives, focusing on that, I will rely on a questionnaire that I developed a couple of years ago, and that was broadly distributed among individual masters and artisans and participants of interest groups. There were four large blocks of questions. What's your motivation to practice a craft? Where did you learn your craft? What are the sources of your inspiration? And what are your thoughts on the perspective in our age? And I will give you a brief overview of the responses, which will show the development tendencies of traditional craft in the 21st century in Latvia, as well as contemporary folk arts. In previous years, crafts were important as a source of income for those who practiced them and their families, and the textiles and other materials had to be sourced and that was not always easy, but in our day, artisan and craftsman work is a conscious choice, no longer an economic necessity as much as in the past. And these people have made a deliberate choice out of interest and love for traditional folk culture. Their works are exhibited in fairs. The masters are instructed by the organizers of interest groups in traditional techniques, and then there are also creative masters who apply new ideas, new techniques, but then there are others who stick to traditional techniques. Modern tendencies of arts are also applied, and every single artisan item is a fruit of creativity, but all of that with the traditional in mind. Very often, artisan craftsmen ask themselves a question: where does the traditional end and where does the contemporary start? And I can quote here that there is no clear distinction between the traditional and the contemporary. That's one view. Others believe that the traditional develops under the influence of the contemporary, then others still think that the contemporary of our day will be traditional in the future, and that it's always been like that. Traditional values can also be viewed as modern because traditions are indeed modern in our day, and the immaterial arts fit very well in the modern environment. The necessity of preserving traditional folk arts is seen very clearly by those who participated in my questionnaire. They think that every nation has to strive to preserve their traditions, but at the same time they have to develop in a contemporary spirit. This can be observed in folk costumes, in other crafts, and always the aspects of quality and original original ideas have to be kept in mind. Ornaments and decorations, motifs are found on these items, and they are a continuum. I very much hope that the ideas that I presented to you today will be taken into account in developing Latvian contemporary folk art. In closing my speech, I would like to express that contemporary crafts are part of the intangible folk culture. They are an expression of our nation's identity, of its soul, and worldviews that are passed on from generation to generation. This will happen through the work of individual masters, studios, interest groups. The skills of the masters are on display. When we see their works, their rational and emotional are both represented here. Thank you for your attention.
Mākslas eksperte Linda Rubene un Latvijas Nacionālajiem kultūras centram, protams, Latvijas tautslietišķās mākslas nozare ir ļoti pateicīga gan par dažādu tautslietišķās mākslas studiju atbalstu, gan arī par brīnišķīgā pasākuma satieco meistaru rīkošanu. Dod vārdu.
Labdien!
Arī pasaulē, ne tikai šeit, Rīgā uz vietas. Vispirms es vēlos pateikties muzejam par brīnišķīgu sadarbību un šīs idejas uzturēšanu šīs konferences organizēšanā. Un arī man ir prieks, ka jaunā paudze ienāk muzeja, tā teikt, darbā, apgūst arī to tradicionālā un iesaistās pasākumu rīkošanā jau ar varbūt citu spēku un citu iedvesmu, un paldies jums par to. Tātad, jā, mani sauc Linda Rubene, un es pārstāvu Latvijas Nacionālo kultūras centru, un esmu tautslietišķās mākslas eksperte, un šajā jomā strādāju jau vairāk kā 20 gadus. Un šīs reizes mana tā tēma, par ko es stāstīšu, būs tās lietišķā māksla Latvijā 21. gadsimta sākumā. Un klausoties Aiju, es jūtu, ka mums ļoti sasaucās līdzīgi šīs lietas.
While I was listening to Aija, I saw that these that we share similar worldview, and it is indeed the case. I do support your statements entirely. If we look at the notion applied folk art or the folk art, there is a conception or perception that this notion was introduced by Austrian art historian Alois Reigl, who opposed this art to academic art and the products of industrialization. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was considered to be non-professional art, even though it has a lot of professional traditions behind it. Today we understand folk art as a participation of individuals and groups in different interests, social, ethnic backgrounds in developing national cultural processes. Folk art is formed today by interaction of amateur art and professional art. We have been developing new terms in this Latvian National Center for Cultures Industry Council. There are several experts, also masters and craftsmen who helped us coin these terms. Our folk applied art is the creation that is done by the nation, and it reflects its worldview, its self-awareness and its ideals. It is decorative. Its items can be used in daily life. They have aesthetical value. Today folk art can be applied folk art can be divided into two groups, so broad groups: traditional applied arts and contemporary applied arts. That is more like fashionable. These images show you some traditional artifacts and contemporary artifacts. So we see black and white and images in color. We sometimes forget that even the old art was colorful, actually. We see that today these artifacts are made in a different way, but there is something like a bridge that unites the past and the present. Who is involved in this folk applied art? There are individual masters, all kinds of collectivities, social organizations, associations that are involved in this process in Latvia. So the folk applied art in Latvia in the 20th century carries over the previous traditions. They have old roots, ancient roots in Latvia. We are interested in exploring our past, and probably Latvia is the only country in the world that has such an active, such activity in terms of these artisan activities. They organize shows, they explore the past as much as they can. The next slide shows you some of the artifacts, the most popular, mostly used, and this slide shows you proportional sectors in folk applied arts: weavers, textile arts, all kinds of handicraft, and yes, cloth and fabric producers are majority. They maintain this tradition, and there are other categories. The Latvian National Center for Culture cooperates with all kinds of individual masters and collectivities. The studio has a head, and his or her knowledge helps to organize the collective work of the studio. For some people it's just a hobby, for other people a kind of training, they learn new techniques, and later on their creations are displayed on shows. Here you can see on the map, on the territory of Latvia, the orange spots are the cities, the green are the regions. So you see how many collectivities or groups are there. So we have to help develop and maintain this trend. We organize seminars and shows. One of the events is called Meet Your Master. It's been around for more than 10 years. It started in 2009. There was just a small number of participants involved in this project, but it's catching on, and now we have at least 150 points. About 300 masters are animating in this event, and here you see the table with the analysis breakdown per year, how many, the numbers of participants are relative. Not everyone was registering, recording these numbers precisely enough, but the general trend is that the support has grown, the number of participants and visitors has changed. Because of the COVID, there was a postponement from the spring to the autumn. The regional reform has made an impact. Now we have the numbers of regions has changed down to 38, and also the support. We had a specialist at our center, and now the workload is shared among the colleagues. If you are interested in this, you can visit the web page. It's called Look Up Your Master. There is information about these years. You can look up your masters contact them. We are working on updating and developing this page. We are uploading videos from events with the masters, and I would like to add that this is in progress, and maybe next year we will change the setup, and I would like to thank everyone who is supporting us. And what is the outcome? Is it just a number of the time well spent over the 2 or 3 years? Of course, you will not become a master, but you can get a general idea. Of course, you need more time to become professional master, but such events generally popularize folk applied art in Latvia. We are hopeful. We hope that a new generation will come and change the situation. The youngsters, children in Latgalia and other regions have been very active. Here you see photographs from Ikšķile. Children from preschool age were brought to the class, and they could dress their dolls in folk costumes. And in this time, the studio called Tīna, the masters taught the girls to embroider shirts from real cloth, from real fabric. It's not just something fake. So they got acquainted with all kind of weaving equipment, and they could make improvised belts and other things, ribbons. So it's a possibility for all kinds of generations to be included in our traditions. Thank you for your attention, and I would like you to watch a short video, short movie showing a recent event. We had a folk music and dance festival. It was a huge event, 150 years celebration, and there were a show, and at least 3,000 authors participated in an exhibition room of 900 square meters, and you can just have an insight on this video, so that to have a visual. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader Rubene, for a very colorful presentation. And Meet Your Master is an event that we also value highly. And next speaker will be from another important association representing traditional arts here in Latvia. Dagmāra Prīberga. She will give a presentation on arts and crafts in terms of craftsmanship and tradition. Good day to all participants of our conference. To explain why it's worth working in folk art is difficult, almost impossible. What is our motivation? What is the stimulus that keeps pushing us to engage in this area, to explore our national culture, to preserve it? These are questions that are difficult to answer. Thank God, my generation is also represented here. So I want to tell you why we have brought into existence our association, how we work, how we communicate with other associations worldwide. I'm proud that I have had the opportunity to observe the work of other colleagues throughout the world, and God forgive me if I say that Latvia is special also on an international scale here. We try to encourage and involve a broad number of artisans and representatives of the intangible cultural heritage. And indeed, a large number participates in our events. These masters offer an invaluable added value to our society, the prestige, the self-awareness of our national heritage. And this is a lifelong impact. These topics are also returning to the school curricula. Nowadays, it's not enough to organize a folk and dance festival every 5 years. We need to work continuously. So I want to thank you from my heart to all of the representatives of the traditional culture here. Hello, I am Gita Prīberga, Dagmāra's daughter, and I will read her presentation. The Latvian Folk Arts Association was founded to develop Latvian applied traditional arts. I want to thank all the masters from Riga and the Latvian regions whose works are used in photographs that will be on an exhibit in this presentation. The folk traditional art is part of our cultural heritage. It's shown in works of craft, and this also reflects cultural and economic development processes, the way traditional arts develop, and we also have problems that we encounter. There is a lack of culture marketing and financial support for craftsmen. Without politics like that, it is difficult to compete with industrial products, difficult for artisan and craftsmen to compete with industrial products. So this support is very much needed. Many masters, porters, weavers, producers of folk costumes, smiths show their regional traditional culture in their works, and they ensure that our folk culture is passed on to the next generations. However, there is no development without the participation of the broader society. So the Latvian Culture Association tries to encourage participation of the younger generation in these processes and to popularize works of our craftsmen. Livia Sola, the chair of the Estonian Folk Art Association, proposed a broader cooperation to us, and we have thankfully taken up this proposal. We organized an exhibition of folk culture, myself in the middle, myself in the center. And we had a conference with delegates from Finland, Estonia, Sweden, Slovakia, France, who participated in our folk and dance festival as visitors. And here we see some exhibits from this exhibition, myself in the center. 1,942 exhibits were on display there. 15 years ago, in 2008, we started an exhibition of the traditional folk costumes, where folk costumes were shown to our visitors. So we had a fresh idea to do a fashion show, and here we see some photographs from the first events of this kind. In Kiskunhalas, Hungary, we participated in an event, and then in Slovakia the year on, and at a European crafts conference, and we also joined an international organization, and we as an association, for us that was an important stepstone. We have exchanged experience with our Lithuanian colleagues. And at the Riga City Festival, we also had a side event organized by Dagmāra Prīberga together with participants from the University of Latvia. Dagmāra Prīberga gave a presentation, a speech during that conference. Together with Riga City Council, we organized an exhibition on the applied folk arts in Riga. In Budapest, at the International Festival, we were also represented. Latvia was represented in many international conferences. In fact, the ornament as our identity, that was a presentation that was given at this conference by Dagmāra Prīberga, and 9 masters with 13 exhibits participated in 2012 and at Radec in Slovenia at an international conference. That was one of the largest cultural events of Slovenia. Maribor was the European capital of culture at that time, and that exhibition later traveled to Austria as well. In St. Peter's Church, there was an exhibition in Baltica 2012, this International Cultural Festival, where we had thousands of visitors. We had a fair of artists and masters in the Vārmanas Park in central Riga. Our association participated in the General Assembly, European General Assembly in Sweden in 2013. And we also viewed the organization of a similar conference in Latvia. So the General Assembly, the next General Assembly was organized in Latvia. On international issues, I am the representative of our association. So we have a structural funds project financed by the European Union that I'm involved in. We are trying to show the values on which the work of our artisans and craftsmen is based, and to encourage policies that would support the work of these masters. There was also a research project on internationalization and exchange. In the presentation you can find a link to this in Latvian and English. In 2014 this conference was organized, or this project was organized. So many tendencies that were topical then can be still observed today. And you will find another link in my presentation to another project that our association organized. Here in the Folk Dance Festival, we had an exhibition on applied traditional arts, and in Vārmanas Central Riga Park, we also exhibited some works of our craftsmen. We had a project with 16 participant countries who participated: Riga, a General Assembly meeting in Riga, and I am a member of the of this organization, and we had in 2014 an exhibition where laces were on display from different countries, traditional works of lace. We had an international conference on lace art. Solveiga is the president of this federation. Now it's called the European Organization of Crafts. And this was the meeting in Riga, photo from that event. Participates in organizing exhibits. In 2016, we had an exhibition on black and white. With more than 300 authors and their works on display. And in 2019, more than 200 authors' works were on display in the exhibition, in a summer exhibition that was visited by more than 12,000 visitors. And then COVID struck, the pandemic struck, and the association had to stop their work. But our creative work continued, observing all the health requirements of the time. Best practice examples. In conclusion, in 2016, our association, together with the State Cultural Capital Fund and other organizations, produced this book on lace art, traditional lace art in Latvia, and their techniques and traditional heritage and their preservation. The lace art has also been recognized as part of Latvia's intangible cultural heritage, together with the support of the International Cultural Capital Fund, the National Cultural Capital Fund. We have set up a website where lace art is on display, and this year and next year our work will continue to show the lace art and the masters of Latvia. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dagmāra, for your enlightening presentation in the topical issues of the association. But now I will ask
Nemateriālā kultūras mantojuma politikas un tiesību kadrbiros. Latvijas kultūras akadēmijas
a representative from the Latvian Academy of Culture, Professor Anita Vaivade, to present her paper, Geographical Indications for Local Craft Products, Insights into EU Legislation Initiative. Thank you. Good day, everyone. I'm pleased to be here and participate at the conference. The topics are very important, not just here, but in Europe. And I will try to present you with a future view. We have done a lot and we are doing a lot. And we see that masters and practitioners and business people participate in these processes. And I would like to focus on a more specific topic. As I was introduced, I am part of this intangible heritage department at the Academy of Culture, and we work with the Organization for Intangible Cultural Heritage in Paris. We focus on important topics, and we are also interested in rights, and I will try to highlight some of the aspects today. I am also happy that we meet today when the crafts fair takes place, and I will therefore look at some of the aspects related to the fairs. No, if we speak about research and new legislative initiative at European level, now about research. There have been regional cooperation projects in Europe. We try to work at our Academy of Culture, starting new projects. We involve other academic institutions in Latvia, the University of Latvia, focusing on factors that have impact on the existence of artisan activities and their transfer or succession. It's been looked at as ecosystem, but craftsmanship is quite a practical activity, creative activity, and we look at various political and legal instruments and their impact on applied arts. This is a vast field. It has to do with taxation, with forms of entrepreneurship, all kinds of factors whether we recognize the status of a master, creative personalities and professionals have their say in this. In our Academy of Culture, we have seen that in various European countries the craftsmanship has different various statuses. There is a lot of things that can be done, and as I said, it's a vast field, and it is good that we have this conference today and can look at things that are topical in Latvia. If we turn to the future, there have been some ideas about this is regulation still under discussion. So it's not yet as implementation mechanisms. It is important to aspects are being discussed at the European Commission and the European Parliament, and whether these instruments are relevant to us. It is expected that in the near future there will be a legal framework for these things. The initiative offers protection for local craft and industrial products, also that have geographical indication or geographical local reference. So these names could be protected at EU level. There is already some legal regulation for this. You've seen probably foodstuffs and marks saying that this is a local product or a geographical indication, something special in Latvia. There are lamproons and some butter produced and bakery that's been protected. There have not been so many, but we have the idea of offering such protection to maybe some locally or specifically important items protected in this way. And in May this year, the European Parliament published an announcement that such a regulation is impending. It might take some years before this enters into force. Transitional period. This page that I've included in English, it covers different products and materials. Medium enterprise activity. We need why would that need to be like this? And we hear several arguments. It could boost regional economy, maybe create jobs, tourism, benefit the tourism and the recognizability of local products, improve, should be fair, not unfair. Some products are counterfeit. We try not to use our customers in try to protect the we really like to see these specific names only used for specific products made here in Latvia. And the next slide shows you some conceptual ideas about the works. This has not been discussed in the plenary, but the discussion has still not yet taken place. But you can see that the main idea of this regulation is to set up the system and to protect geographical indication for craft products and also for industrial products. The idea is that the products would have industrial products are standardized and traditional products suppose or presuppose a geographical area and also have a proven historical usage. So it's a broad formulation, a broad reading of this. So this regulation is still in process of being developed, and in order to understand whether or not this mechanism is needed, there is a lot of research going on, a lot of data, aspects of employment, taxation. So these studies are very detailed, but one of the ideas is that the national and EU level regulation show differences, and there is a need for harmonization, for unification, and to enhance product quality recognition. It would be to the best interest of craftsmen so that their job is recognized, not just in intangible terms, but also economically. So this is why this study is made, and also this aspect of counterfeit goods. We have to assess the risks. If they are small, maybe this system is not justified, but that needs to be seen later. And there is an opportunity of using the intellectual property protection for different products with registration and so forth. So the studies show that the intellectual property protection tools are used not very often, or to a small extent. And a positive influence could be both in terms of the internal market and the external trade, and that could benefit the rural regions. Whether this regulation will produce a change, it's an open question, but this instrument is definitely an important one. Now, coming back to the keyword of this conference, intangible cultural heritage, and the discussions pertaining to geographical indication protection, and their relation to other policies. And the instruments, the tools that we have at our disposal, this is a complex landscape. And in conclusion, if we mentioned UNESCO context and intangible cultural heritage, the economy, the terms of economy that are involved here, we heard the UNESCO Convention for the safeguarding of the intangible cultural heritage. Its rules are very broad. They mention that these activities help people to earn a living, and there are economic perspectives to this. Heritage can be an economy drive, and the ethical principles that were adopted in 2015, there are 12 such principles involving intangible cultural heritage as a whole. They emphasize, for instance, the need for the actors, for the masters and craftsmen to be the ones that benefit from this most in terms of money. So if economic value is generated, so they should also benefit from it. And other principles. And the latest development a couple of weeks ago, in a couple of weeks in Paris, there will be a meeting discussing the economic use of intangible cultural heritage. So there will be an expert meeting working on guidelines, focusing on various issues and risks in relation to intangible cultural heritage and its economic use. It has been in the focus of this UNESCO activity for quite some time, and the experts have discussed the fair practices or the risk of over-exploitation of the tradition commercially. So these aspects will be addressed in the new guidelines that are expected. So this was the future perspective, and if you are interested in this and you think that this could be useful in your work, you can look at our web page, and with this I conclude. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you to Anita Vaivade, Associated Professor. Indeed, the legal framework is indispensable for immaterial culture, so we thank everyone who takes care of that. And our last presenter, I would like to give the floor now to Master of Arts Daina Kraukle. It's a great moment that we have her here in the Latvian Ethnographic Open Air Museum. Today we can see contemporary works of folk art on display in our fair, and that's why I would like to present, to give the floor now to Daina Kraukle, who will focus in her speech on our annual fairs. Good day. My name is Daina Kraukle. And in the context of the topic that was introduced, I can say that I have been participated in the annual fair for about 30 years specifically, and in the past years I keep participating as a member of the expert commission, assessing new participants. The annual fair organized by the Latvian Ethnographical Open Air Museum organized this year for the 51st time. It's always been, and it is still, one of the most popular events of this kind in Latvia. Altogether, we have seen around 1 million visitors to our annual fairs. In our cultural area in Latvia, the annual fair is very important. It has always been an important event to bolster our national self-awareness, just as the Song and Dance Festival is pivotal for singers and dancers, then for craftsmen and artisans, it's our annual fair. It gives them an opportunity to display their work, the fruit of the work, for the entire previous year. Here we see Marija and Jānis Sankovski, which are a married couple. They have been participating for decades in our annual fair, and in Linda's presentation we saw similar pieces of pottery on display, and indeed this is quite a typical artifact for our annual fair. And now I would like to give you some insights to the history of our annual fairs. These annual fairs have been organized for many years, indeed for centuries, in Riga since the 16th century. And this is a shot of Riga, historical photograph and pictures, and we see that through the centuries, the spot where the annual fairs have traditionally been organized has been transformed. We saw 1926, and here we see 2004. Riga had become a major city, following Lübeck, Cologne, Hamburg, Gdansk, and Königsberg. Riga had about 12,000 inhabitants in the 16th century, and the annual fair was organized in the last decade of July. Foreign nationals were also licensed to trade there, and grain and other produce of agriculture were also on offer. In the 18th century, almost a third of the city dwellers were engaged in trade. Their economic footprint in Riga was very palpable. From 1768 to 1823, Johann Christoph Brotze was active in Riga. He was a researcher of folk culture, and he made beautiful paintings. And then in this picture you can see that the produce that was on display in the annual fair 100 years ago was very similar to what you can find there today. The place for the annual fair has changed, but it has always been an opportunity to demonstrate new techniques. Photographs have always been present in the annual fairs to make photo portraits of the participants and visitors. So sometimes amusing as well, but at that time the annual fair was a major event for city dwellers as well as for people from the countryside, where they could meet once a year with their countrymen from other regions, and if photographs could be made to immortalize those events, that was even nicer. We had circus events, and many people have written memories recording that exotic animals were on display. In Liepāja, for example, circus animals, elephants in Liepāja were spotted by children for the first time in their lives during these events. We have fairs of artisans in our day as well, and the Scandinavian folklore group is also in this tradition of singing at the fairs, and there is a playful tradition of mockery songs by which the participants of these fairs are welcomed. This tradition is practiced by Skandinieki. During solstice, summer solstice and winter solstice, we have had these fairs yielding good income to the city. The income has varied from 57,000 to 227,000 rubles in the 19th century, which were vast amounts of money at that time. Participants about 110, which was quite significant for that time. The Christmas fair was organized either for a month, usually for a month, from 10th December until the 10th of January, normally in the city council square, Rātslaukums, but in the 19th century also on the esplanade. The most beautiful market is the herbs market. The traditional has been carried on into our day, and we have a Christmas market as well. Then we have works of art inspired by the annual fairs, and this is an annual fair that was organized in Valmiera in picture by Petrovs, and then the central market of Riga, and Master Broce, whom I already mentioned. We see the way the tradesmen were dressed in those days, a large variety of dresses, and that can be compared with our own day. This is the herbal market in the 20s and the 30s of the last century, and the city view of Riga. Now we are counting the year 1971. That was the first year when in the open air museum we organized this annual craftsman's fair. In 1971 we have a document that I would like to quote from. To revive the museum expositions in 1971, we have to organize an annual fair and to work out a program for that fair. End of quote. And the museum was then chaired by Ausma Nesterova, whom we see in this picture. From that day, we have the tradition to gather craftsmen and artisans. At that time, the annual fair was organized in the first weekend of June, the 5th and 6th of June in 1971. At that time, there were no posters, no major announcement of the fair, but still the visitors' interest was remarkable. About 6,000 visitors in 1971. In 1972, the situation had changed. For the first time, we had a poster for the annual fair and a placard. Both can be seen in this slide. On the placard we have an apple tree in a china vase. The placard was designed by Māra Taurīte. Poster, excuse me, and then we have the posters from the next years created by Jānis Reinbergs, Jānis Galdiņš, Gunārs Smelters, Kristīna Jurjāne, and museum staff Andra Otto, Maija Avota, Māra Kuplā, Uldis Veisbooks, and others. Museum staff did not immediately accept the designation of an annual fair or market, as it were in Latvian, and therefore at first it was not known by this designation, but exhibition of the contemporary applied arts. At that time, the term market was considered to have a negative connotation. So only traditional collectives or interest groups, organized interest groups, were allowed to participate at the annual fair. An expert commission had to assess prior to the exhibition the works on display in Riga. This was overseen by the city council. The expert commission worked for 2 or 3 days. There were 5 or 6 experts who participated in this work. There were strict criteria. In the end of the 1980s, when the economic situation in the country was difficult, and so not enough works could be produced, works of craft, to satisfy the demand, and therefore the expert commission's work became obsolete. At 7 a.m. in the morning on the first day of the annual fair, the stalls were empty, and the masters could only demonstrate their live work in the next days. There were long queues at some stalls. The Tulsa weavers from Tulsi had an interesting idea. They had very high prices for their produce in the hope that they would not be bought too quickly, but that was an illusion. It turned out that all the produce was bought very quickly and nothing was left to display. So museum staff had to consider how to deal with these challenges, and from 1991 to 1999 the fair was organized for 1 day only, not several days. We had 48,000 in 1989 visitors, and at 5 a.m. in the morning there was a flow of visitors already. whereas the craftsmen were in no hurry. Then, in the years to come, the situation stabilized. Now it is stable enough. There is a broad offer, but also a constant demand. We see products of various qualities. We have masters who demonstrate their work at the fair. In the 1990s, the visitors had more money at their disposal, and so more and more we saw that artistry of lower quality was on display, and thus 4 criteria were agreed upon for the works on display at the fair. I'm sorry, I've lost my thread a bit. So the first criteria was that archaeological and or ethnographic heritage should be on display. There should be a sufficient level of quality. The works of art should be produced individually and from traditional materials. The expert commission now includes museum staff as well as other experts and masters. And it also became more difficult for the craftsmen to sell their produce legally. Apart from the annual fair, so the annual fair was very important in that sense. They had few other opportunities to meet their customers. The only precondition to participate in the annual fair was that the interest groups had to organize an exhibition at least once annually, apart from our annual fair, to ensure a minimum level of quality. We have individual masters and groups participating still to our very day, and still we have these interest groups and folk art studios who work under the auspices of experienced masters, therefore ensuring a high quality of their crafts and artistry. During the fair we also have playful dances, ride-outs, other events for the visitors, and I have a couple of conclusions to make. Firstly, without the annual fair, many artisans would lack an opportunity to display their work. Secondly, this is also a place for Latvians to meet. And third, the crafts on display have been of such high quality that the organizers, namely the Latvian Museum of History and the Latvian Ethnographic Open Air Museum staff, have also often bought many pieces on display here. A few more quotes. The blacksmith Zandas Ķergalves says that I'm always given the yearbook, the calendar during the fair, and I immediately note down the first week of June for the annual fair. And then we have the carpenter Guido Graždanovic, who says that the Open Air Museum's annual fair is the same importance that the for Catholic Christians the annual festivities in Aglona. And the Viva Via Vachere says that I need the annual fair like the air to breathe. It embodies my Latvian identity. So this is an opportunity to see how year by year we can offer tendencies of development in crafts and artistry from all regions of Latvia, of a very high quality, and with creative designs. It seems that the stress of the everyday life in city disappears here, and we see interiors that are filled with beautiful pieces of art here, and a few more photographic impressions in conclusion. You're all invited to visit our annual fair as well. You can see it on display today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you for this entertaining insight. As a museum worker, I was also captivated. And now we can open the floor for discussion. So please, also the ones that follow us on Facebook, you can write questions on Facebook as a comment. Perhaps you have questions here. I have a question on the counterfeit items. I'm not quite sure what is meant by it. If you can falsify a painting, but is it possible in craftsman's work at such a level or perfection that such counterfeiting is at all possible? Thank you for your question. I think we are not really, this is not so often the case here in Latvia, but looking at the experience gained in other countries, looking at prestigious or recognizable items that are very expensive, we see that there can be situations that products are presented as produced in France, for instance, in a region X, but are actually made elsewhere. It's about the protected denominations. So there can be attempts to mislead consumers, and so we have to fight such attempts.
particular to the Open Air Museum for hosting this marvelous event and for combining it with the Tirgus, because I believe that this is a marvelous idea to have the conference together with the Tirgus. Thank you. I would like to thank also to the previous speakers who presented the experience of Latvia in enhancing and supporting the craftsman work. Also these nice ideas to show crafts to children. But I would like to ask, is there any practice and are the crafts, the folk crafts, included in the school program? For example, in the Mākslas art. So, is there any such practice? Thank you.
Tātad jautājums par to, vai ir arī zinām praksi iekļaut arī tautas amatniecības skolu programmās. Kā interešu, jā.
There have been in cases when it's included in schools, and there are also like crafts as subject at schools that is taught directly.
Если можно на русском, потому что мой русский чуть лучше, чем английский. На Балканах мы воюем за торговую марку и за продукт ракия. Литовцы воюют с белорусами за кому принадлежит определенный кулинарный продукт, значит, и называется цепелиной. Я знаком с два продукта в Латвии, которые мне по душе, и почему-то все докладчики пропустили это. Рижский бальзам и горох со шпеком. Это тоже культурное наследство, и я думаю, что вы не должны пропускать такие важные моменты. Это культурное наследство. Paldies.
Tāda komentārs par to, ka ir dažādi kultūras fakti, kur cīnās savā starpā Baltkrievijā ar Lietuvas.
Belarusians and Lithuanians fight against fight for different products. Latvians for balsam and Lithuanians have cepelinae, etc. And the speakers thinks that it should be exploited. The next question. As I've been active in this area for many years, I would like to point out that it is difficult. A professional artist would like to produce something, and in folk applied art it is much more difficult. It's a collective activity, and if there is something that is individual that can have honorary mention that this person is the author, this is a source of pride for people. We've seen it on exhibitions, on shows. So these masters that have been named, they are so proud. They behave completely differently with regard to their title. And I am a little worried about the competence of and the skills of these commissions that work and assess the quality. The professors have sometimes imposed their own interpretation, and I'm, with all respect, they do have impact on the work, on its form. So we have to tread very carefully. To look at what happens in the market, on the market. And I'm very grateful to the museum, to the open-air museum, that they try to make their own way, break their path, try to strike the right balance between the traditional and the contemporary trends. And they also explain what makes an artifact real, what is a counterfeit item. Folk art is endangered. We are the ones that bring this art forward in Europe. We have these studios that are unique. I would like to invite everyone to join this school and this trade to gain insights in what is folk art. It is a very rewarding process. For us, it's maybe natural. We are born Latvians. We cannot avoid it, as it were. So that was my comment. Solvita Ludiņa, Association for Traditional Culture. A couple of days ago at Liepāja University, we discussed the need for a research institute that could investigate the ways of succession. And for the statistical, I would like to see such statistics in further research, also showing the age of these masters to see how long they can work. I've been studying this for 10 years and in a doctoral program, but your statistics would be of use to me. And I would like to ask also Linda Ruben, why Iekšķiles preschool came to you. My explanation is that Iekšķile has 3 preschool establishments or educational institutions that are interested in Latvian future, and such interest should be boosted in all Latvian schools. Thank you for this encouraging comment. Are there any more questions from participants, from our guests? There are no more questions, so I would like to ask all the participants to go to see the museum fair at 12 and at 2 o'clock. We ask you to, now we have the break, and at 2 o'clock I would ask you to come to the gate. There will be a guided tour, but until then there is a break and you can get acquainted with the fair at your own pace. And for the Facebook participants, we are meeting tomorrow at 9:30 at the same place. Thank you.